Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first Jungian psychological analysis of the manga Goodnight Punpun. Before we start, I was recommended by a viewer to read this manga, as well as my brother, who's a well seasoned manga consumer. He had really great things to say about this manga and its ability to connect with the realities of human suffering. So I figured I read it. Before we start the video, I want to say thank you to the viewer and for your recommendation. I want to do a psychological analysis of this manga through a step-by-step process. So today we will only be covering chapter 1 to 10. And as I read more of the chapters, I will continue to do more videos on this manga. My first impression of this manga is that it gives you two different aspects of understanding one's being: an existential understanding of the patterns of life, as well as an in-depth understanding of the development of the human psyche and how it impacts our perception of the world around us. We will focus on the second aspect and see how the characters in the manga develop through the first few chapters and what this says about the human psyche and what we can learn from these characters. It was surprising to me to the degree in which the manga incorporated Jungian psychological themes. This may have been consciously put in, but most likely it was unconscious to a profound degree. Punpun Punyama, the protagonist of the story, can be seen as a representation of the individual's quest for self-realization and wholeness. Jungian psychology recognizes that human beings strive for individuation, a process of integrating their conscious and unconscious aspects to achieve psychological balance. Punpun's experience throughout the narrative symbolizes his journey towards individuation, where he confronts and reconciles with various aspects of his own psyche. I'll orient the psychological analysis to Carl Jung's ideas of the individuation process and the shadow. For those who do not know Carl Jung, he was a famous Swiss psychologist who was profound in developing various ideas regarding the human psyche. He noted that the goal of a person was to follow this individuation process. In this sense, we see the beginning of the manga and the purpose of the manga as the exploration of how Punpun navigates this process of individuation. With that being said, Carl Jung defined the shadow as unconscious aspects of an individual's personality. It represents the parts of ourselves that we repress, deny, and are unaware of. The shadow is composed of aspects that are considered negative, socially unacceptable, or incompatible with their ego or self-image. Therefore, the shadow of a criminal may be softness and a need to be cared for and to be vulnerable with others. The shadow of a shy and timid person would be to be assertive and dominant. You can see the shadow as things we suppress due to a variety of mechanisms, whether it be social conditioning or as a survival strategy. Now that we have a surface level understanding of the concept of the shadow, this manga from chapter 1 to 10 is a perfect example of the psychological development of the shadow within a person through their childhood experiences, as well as how the shadow behaves when it is not incorporated into our personality. The development of the shadow is often through the experiences that we have as individuals within our childhood, and more specifically within our family dynamics. The manga begins with Punpun's family introduction, which is filled with chaos. His father is abusive to his mother and attempts to hide it from Punpun. But at the same time, Punpun sees his father as somewhat of a hero figure, someone who he wants to gain the respect of. This dynamic initiates Punpun's first psychological development, which is his shadow self. He sees the relationship between his mother and father and knows innately that his father is too aggressive towards his mother, and that his father is the archetype of a hypermasculine and dominant individual. In this sense, his conceptualization of what a non-healthy relationship between a man and a woman is developed in his psyche. He takes every note of this assertiveness by his father as negative, without transparency or balance. In this sense, Punpun develops a shadow in which he sees any form of aggressiveness and assertiveness as negative due to his perceptions of what an ideal relationship should be, based on his experiences with his parents. The ideal in his eyes is one that is far away from what he sees at home. In fact, the complete opposite. He has now developed in his psyche that a relationship and a role of a man is non-aggression and compliance with his partner. We can see this with his interactions with Aiko, a girl in his class who he is in love with, where he is completely submissive to her, and though often she says things that seem to be extreme, controlling, and obsessive, he sees his place as being beside her, despite the extreme personality she presents. He has inner dialogue about the obsessiveness of Aiko, but never says a word. Through a Jungian interpretation, Punpun's personality and characteristics lack an integration of his darker self, or his shadow, the aspects that he has shunned away in a conscious and unconscious manner due to his upbringing and his family dynamic. The manga also shows how the shadow erupts when it is not integrated well into one's personality. This can be seen through Punpun's teacher, Shantaro Harumi. He is depicted as an authority figure who exhibits abusive and manipulative behavior towards Punpun and his classmates. He embodies qualities of cruelty, sadism, and a disregard for the well-being of others. From a Jungian perspective, the teacher can be seen as a projection of the shadow aspect that exists within every individual, particularly individuals in positions of power and authority. He's the authority figure in his classroom, and without the integration of the dark sides of having authority, his shadow erupts on occasion. An example of this is his passive-aggressive tone and eruption when he assumes that Punpun had not completed his homework. The teacher from a Jungian perspective is deluded to his own nature of taking advantage of the power he holds. As such, when he erupts in his emotional reactions to his students, he combats that by making jokes or passive-aggressive comments. This is a great example in your everyday life. A person who is constantly passive aggressive or erupt into emotions and plays it off like they are calm has yet to integrate the darker sides of themselves and acknowledge their ability to be cruel, hurtful, and angry with others. I do not know the backstory of the teacher, but I can assume that somewhere in his life, his experiences have taught him that the ideal is to be good, even when your emotions and feelings say otherwise, and to integrate any aspects of aggressive behavior leads to evil. In Jungian terms, the emergence of the shadow is often a result of an imbalance within the psyche. When the shadow remains unconscious and unacknowledged, it can exert a powerful influence on the individual's thoughts, emotions, and behavior. The teacher's outburst in an ecstatic manner represents this. The teacher's abusive conduct towards Punpun and others represent the destructive potential of the shadow when left unchecked. Another extremely nuanced psychological phenomena within the manga is the character of God. God in Goodnight Punpun can be interpreted as an archetypical representation of the transcendent function of the divine within the individual psyche. In Jungian psychology, the transcendent function bridges the conscious and unconscious realms, providing a pathway to integration and self-discovery. The character of God serves as a guide and catalyst for Punpun's transformation, encouraging him to confront his shadow, face his fears, and gain insight into his true nature. God in this sense also represents his unconscious. The faceless and enigmatic nature of God in the story reflects the unknowable aspects of the divine and unconscious. It represents Punpun's encounter with the numinous, a powerful and mysterious force that lies beyond the grasp of ordinary consciousness. This encounter serves as a catalyst for his psychological growth and exploration of his own psyche and depths. Punpun's journey involves a confrontation with the shadow, which is manifested as his fears, insecurities, and repressed desires. The character of God acts as a mediator, assisting Punpun in integrating his shadow elements and bringing them into conscious awareness. Also, the archetypical imagery presented in the story contributes to the psychological development. Archetypes are universal and symbolic patterns, and images that emerge from the collective unconscious and shape human experience. Immediately as a first-time reader, you notice why is Punpun drawn as a bird-like figure. Punpun's appearance as a bird-like figure can be seen as an archetype of the anima, representing the feminine aspects within the male psyche. The anima archetype embodies emotional sensitivity, creativity, and potential for wholeness. Punpun's interactions with God, or his unconscious, can be understood as his exploration of the anima archetype and his integration of the feminine qualities into his consciousness, as well as the need for the balance between femininity and masculinity within males. There's an endless number of interpretations and psychological aspects within this manga, just from the first 10 chapters. I'll dive more in depth into some of the concepts that I've mentioned in this video in the future, as I believe they themselves deserve a separate video. As for now, I hope this analysis gives you something to think about, and shows how this manga is far from the ordinary story of suffering, but rather a deep exploration of the human psyche from its earliest development. Let me know down in the comments what your thoughts are, and what you agree or disagree with in this video. And as always, take care everyone.